How are you handling all this?
The worst part, truthfully, is I got to sit there with people who are hurting. Bad. And I got to have the long face and the sighing and the platitudes. But I don't feel it. And that makes me feel like a hypocrite. And that makes me mad at them.
Welcome to Third Time's the Charm, when Tony Soprano tries to kill one of his friends. This, my friends, is Cut to Black, a Sopranos sit-down. My name is Jim Scampoli, and I've seen every single episode of The Sopranos.
My name is Jacob Burrows, and I've seen 83 episodes of The Sopranos. What a first 5 minutes, Jim. What a first 5 minutes. We'll get into it. This is episode 18 of season 6, Kennedy and Heidi. Who put this one together, Jim?
This episode was written by Matthew Weiner and series creator David Chase and directed by Alan Taylor. This episode did premiere May 13th, 2007. And yes, as you mentioned, it doesn't take too long for things to ramp up in this particular episode.
Yeah, and with the with the style of The Sopranos and everything we've talked about, it just makes sense because the show, even though we've focused on other characters, the show is as Tony-centered as Tony is himself. All that matters is how things affect Tony. So forget that, Christopher is dead. The important thing is, how does Tony feel about it? So that's really why he dies early on, I think, because his death at the end of an episode could have been a big plot point. No, it's just at the start there, just this character we've seen for the past 2 years every week. His many trials and tribulations. And granted, I did cut ties with him last week, but still, what a way to go.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I guess we'll just kind of get right into it. We got the asbestos is still being dumped, or what they're figuring out where to dump the asbestos. He can't take it there anymore, and there's a deal going on with Phil. Just always the brewings of a New York war. We've seen this faked out so many times. First, it was like, we better not have Phil in there. Then it was like, damn, I wish we had Phil in there. Well, no, first it was, damn, it would be great if Johnny Sack was there. And then we're like, shit, Johnny Sack can't be in there. Then it's like, oh, no, it's good Johnny Sack's there. We can't have Phil in there. Oh, man, we better have Phil. Now Phil's here, and there's an issue with this asbestos. He wants 25%. The friggin' ghoul-looking Butchie's always there, who I hate. He's so perfectly cast because he's just such a little, he's a little ghoul. And he's a little weasel guy with his lazy eye, and he's not straight out of Central Casting, if you will. He feels very authentic, like a muscle there. But anyways, that's just all kind of setting the tone. Now, did you get an inkling at all? Because even in this scene when they're in the car, they mentioned the Departed soundtrack, which I think is timely, at least for when this episode aired. And they're listening Comfortably Numb. It does kind of hang for a bit as Tony's looking at Chris.
And they do it several times. It was fairly obvious that the show is telling us that Tony is noticing that he's high. But I didn't then immediately go, well, of course they're going to crash and then Tony's going to kill him. So didn't see that part coming.
Yeah, I guess, I think you're right that he's noticing something's off. Or is there is there any type in some of these looks? Is there a regret of times lost with his, once surrogate son, Christopher? We haven't seen this scene in a long time of Christopher driving Tony around. It used to be a mainstay.
It's true, but I just saw him he's so tweaking out or whatever you call it. He's just the sound system hasn't got any balls, tries to raise it, and he's just acting all weird and twitchy, and that's all that I thought that Tony was seeing. But maybe there is some of what you're saying as well. I just didn't notice it. Maybe I saw more of that later when he's like, I have to kill this guy.
Yeah, I think you're right. I guess because because the Christopher character always held a soft spot in my heart, even with all his fuck ups and his relapses, even with him killing JT last week, I was still like, nah, Chris, he might come around. Like,
You have watched this show before, right, Jim? Do
Yeah.
you remember this, I assume?
yes, but I'm thinking even in the moment, like even in the
Sure.
moment watching this, I was still kind of like, he might come around. People have done worse. He just killed JT. JT was kind of, I mean, he's innocent, but still, come on.
Well, I sent to you like my sort of theory. A thing that will often happen on any old TV show is that someone will kill someone, and that's how you know they're going to die, because it's kind of telling the audience, "Oh, you don't need to have sympathy for this person anymore. So you don't feel bad when we kill him," sort of thing. It sort of softens the blow. But I feel that's done partially, but not entirely. It obviously doesn't take all of the guilt away, because Christopher only got to that point from all the ribbing and everything that he got from all of his friends, which I think Paulie regrets, and well, a lot of people regret after the fact. But yeah, I feel like some of the guilt is taken away off Tony, but obviously not all of it. I don't know if the previous episode hadn't happened and we just started here, I would be like, what the fuck just happened? So it's an important piece of the puzzle. But I guess it's like you said, he just had a bullet in that gun, and he wanted to fire it, and it was Russian roulette with all of his close friends and family on who was going to get the bullet, and ended up being Christopher. And I feel like this is one of those moments that I'm really glad I didn't know beforehand, because there's no way you can, or I can, rewatch The Sopranos without thinking, not all of their scenes, but a lot of their scenes, like, yeah, Tony's gonna kill this guy later, you know?
Yeah.
And I've watched all of it not thinking that, and you've watched all of that thinking that. So that's why it's really interesting to have this dynamic, and it's going to be really interesting for me to rewatch the beginning of the show again with them all buddy.
Yes, yeah. And yeah, because I guess even especially on rewatch, I really did have sympathy for the way Chris's friends didn't. Not that he doesn't have his own responsibilities, and that he does make his own choices, especially when he relapses. But he didn't quite have a support system there, where when it wasn't convenient for everyone else, they weren't quite okay with his sobriety. Yeah. So I'm not saying it's like Tony's fault, but in some cases it's so close to his fault in a lot of ways.
Well, when you look at the scenes when he's like going like, come on, have a drink and all that, like it's kind of Tony's fault.
Yeah, what's this piss tasting non-alcoholic? And then I mean, David Chase in an interview, Jesus, my voice. David Chase,
you're so cracked up over Chris.
Yeah,
even after all this time,
I'm breaking up. David Chase is like, yeah, a lot of people seem to miss the baby seat, the car seat, and it's like, I don't think so, bro, because it's like you go to that car seat so many times, and Tony brings it up a bunch of times, so I think it's pretty clear, Tony, like, I think someone had hinted at this on our Twitter at Shows What You Know with the letter U instead of YOU, by the way, when we were talking about the Paulie scene a few episodes ago, and how Tony was looking for that little extra push so he could maybe kill Paulie. And here he gets it twice over, between rationalizing it in his head about how, he could kill his baby, this guy's a liability, to also just confirming that, yeah, he's high, and he's, the same old Christopher. And he kind of gets it here, where he's like, all right, this is what I need. I can just kill this dude now. And I mean, they point out, well, I guess we didn't even mention Kennedy and Heidi, the titular characters here, who are like, it's finally like, we talk a lot about on this show that the innocent people suffer because of what they do, and they're casualties of their bickering and stuff like that. And it's almost like finally revenge in a weird way, because and they even have the quick moment of like, maybe we should go back, and it's like, I'm on my learner's permit after dark, or whatever. And Alan Sepinwall in the Sopranos Session book makes the statement that these are the two most important characters in Sopranos, because we all have a Kennedy and Heidi inside of us, and especially Tony. And we have that one voice that's telling you to do the right thing, and we have that other voice that's pushing you to the dark side.
Yeah, that sounds like some bullshit hot take, Jim.
I kind of agree. I enjoy it. I enjoy it through the read, but yeah, I definitely, there's a little bit of an eye rolly factor to it there. But I think it's a sound theory, wouldn't you say?
All right. Well, I mean, they're on the right side of the road, though. So in a way, like, it is still Christopher's fault, obviously, because he's the one who drives over to the wrong side and does the swerve. So, if it was true revenge of the normal people, it would just be a plane crash onto their car and they would both die. That would be the only fair way for society to randomly take revenge. But yeah, it is a nice shot of them just, of course they're not going to stop. This is the world of the Sopranos that is bitter and cynical, and why would you? So there's something there, at least. It's also interesting that... I was just going to say that Christopher, he's the one petitioning for peaceful resolution to the conflict. Like, hey, why not stop and smell the roses? Something great to... he seems to be in a good place, but then he's also on drugs, so he's not. Great place to be before you die.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is reminding Tony of, whatever happened to that part of you, whatever happened to the Kennedy part of you, if you will, because Kennedy is the one that says, Heidi, maybe we should go back, Heidi.
Yeah, don't care.
Kennedy, I'm on my learner's permit. We all have that Kennedy and Heidi. Come on, go with it.
All right. That's a great tweet. Great tweet, Jim. So do you have your counter up?
Oh, yeah, Jesus. I almost forgot here.
Yeah, we'd get a lot of shit if we forgot about this one.
Yeah, imagine if we missed this one. Jesus Christ. Yep. So let me get the old counter up here. A long time coming. Good friend of ours. Been around since the beginning. Christopher Moltisanti finally meets his end. Putting us at 75 deaths and 17 walkouts. And let's make sure we don't miss the other death that's coming up soon.
Yes, absolutely.
And also they make real quick back to Sopranos sessions. They do point out and hang on it a bit about Tony's expression here and relating it to Comfortably Numb, because he is kind of like, there's not as much really emotion there. He is just kind of blank-faced, suffocating Christopher. Yeah. In his own blood. I mean, it is kind of hilarious that Christopher's like, just call me a taxi, I'll be good. It's like, dude, there's internal bleeding, clearly. Like, he was probably gonna die either way, but I guess he took away that small chance that maybe they would have saved him, or the ambulance would have got here in time or whatever. But it's just hilarious to think that if he got into a taxi and just gushing blood everywhere, like, get me out of here. Thanks, taxi driver.
No spoilers if you haven't seen it, but it does remind me of Breaking Bad, which obviously came after this, in a way, like a scene in Breaking Bad. We won't get into specifics, but
yes.
Tony, I think he would have made it. But Tony, I feel like before the crash, I think Tony sees that Christopher is high, and he chooses not to do anything about it. And that complacency leads to this. So in a way, he's, cleaning up his own mistake. And weirdly, if this had happened a few seasons ago, like right after Tony threatened to kill him if he ever did drugs again, we'd be like, this actually makes perfect sense. And Tony shouldn't even feel guilty because he did this and almost killed Tony and everything. Like, in the logic of the show, we'd be like, he just threatened to do that. But since then, he's been so relaxed about it. And even in the scene before, the way I read it, he's there, he's watching Christopher, and Christopher is high, and Tony can tell this, but he doesn't even bother bringing it up because Tony is comfortably numb. He's fine. As long as it doesn't cause him any problems, it's fine. And then when it does, he just deals with it. But there's a lot more to say about Christopher's death, but the whole episode is kind of about it, so I guess we'll get more into it as we dig deeper into the plot. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, as you mentioned, taking the guilt off, putting a character in a situation like what he did with JT. And in a lot of cases, what shows will do is, when it's a main character like this anyways, will do the opposite. They'll make them finally get the thing that they needed to get, or great, happy, blissful moment.
just to really make it hurt more. But yeah, you're right. This is because since Tony's involved in it, and Tony's still our main character for the next, few episodes that we have left, even though they're slowly trying to whittle him away more and more. We still got to kind of be on his side, I suppose.
Even though Cleaver, if you'll recall, is about him killing Christopher and then sleeping with his girlfriend, which is what Tony literally does in this episode.
Yeah. So. And I feel like, to jump around a bit, I feel like he goes to Vegas because he's like, I'm going to fuck his widow. Like, I want to fuck his widow so bad. I don't know if that's just my read, but it feels like whenever Kelly's around, like he's looking at her tit and he's like creeping on her, watching her at the funeral, and like staring at her at dinner and stuff. And then he's like, I got to get out of this state. I got to go fuck some other girl that Christopher fucked to get this out of my system.
Yeah. I mean, the episode quite plainly shows us that Tony wants to take on the role of Christopher. Like much like the talented Mr. Ripley, he wants to kill Christopher and then wear his skin, basically, because he never had, he thinks, he never had this sort of guilt-free life. He never got to experience, he never got to go off and just do drugs and not worry about any other shit. So he just literally feels a need to, I don't know if it's partially like, I killed this man and now, I want to fill the hole in society, fill the hole in my heart, or if it's just a more egotistical, I'm so ego-centered, I want everything that was his to be mine. I'm not sure what the driving force is, but he very obviously is like, I'm going to be Christopher now for a bit, and that will make me feel better somehow.
So yeah, moving on from the death scene, we have, Tony gets brought to the hospital and, he plays up the the guy I was with, what's going on with him? And it's like, they pronounced him in the ambulance or whatever. Then we have, Carm gets the call, and I mean, Edie Falco always delivers, especially on the emotion. She has a great reaction to Christopher, and I'm trying to think. Doesn't Tony say something weird? Or maybe it's later.
Not yet. He says a lot of weird shit later, but now he just tells them to.
When he looks, is that supposed to be a body bag with Christopher's body in it?
I think so, because it's his the Cleaver hats there that I think Christopher was wearing that, right? Or
I know, because it does show it's for sure his stuff, but I thought that was just so bizarre. I mean, I guess that's something they would do because it's like they got to put the body somewhere. Yeah. But it's bizarre that it's just like there's the dead body. But
bit of a coinkydink, but I buy it still because the highest priority is probably the living person, so the dead person's not been brought to the morgue yet or whatever. I don't know how it works.
Yeah, no, me neither. And I didn't even pick up that, or actually, I don't think it is. Is that supposed? I guess it is. That's supposed to be a dream. I just assumed it was Kelly's reaction, when it showed that, because in Wiki it talks about how it's a Tony's dream he has. But I mean,
when she screams, sort of the reaction there.
Yeah,
I don't know, because it cuts away and
I guess it cuts away and Tony wakes up. But I can't tell if, I never read it as a dream. And then I was kind of going through some different takes on the episode, and someone pointed out that it's you hear a crow in the background, and it's remember when he saw the crow when he got made, and then Tony's dream? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know about that.
Do you hear a crow in the background, though?
I don't even know. Yeah, listen.
Yep, you do when he wakes up. When Tony wakes up, you hear a crow. So that's fair enough. But I do not believe it to be a dream anyway, because and it's because of this simple reason. We don't cut to Tony waking up with a close-up on his face.
Yeah, I agree.
True, we cut from a close-up, but then it's just a wide shot, and filmic rules state that we're not inside his mind then. So it's just a very short scene.
I agree. I agree that Christopher might have been a feast for crows.
Ooh. All right. HBO, am I right?
Yes,
okay.
Yeah. I love this thing with the guy that keeps talking about how when Carlo's going to come up. I guess it's just because it's such an awkward, you're kind of bummed. This is one of your crew, almost a family member, and it's like, what do you say in these moments? So this one guy keeps talking about how Carlo. Oh no, it's not Carlo. I guess it was AJ. when's Carlo coming up? And then Silvio's like, what's with you and fucking
Yes.
Carlo?
Does mention it a lot, and I'm during the scene. I will admit, look, I'm no Sopranos expert, so I'm like, which one's Carlo again? Like, again, I can't Google any of this because still spoilers. But yeah, I know who Carlo is now, and it is quite funny. You're right. It's basically just one of those things where you're trying to do something helpful or productive, but that's like the one piece of information you have. So that's pretty much it. Yeah, all the lads are there, and I think this is the beginning of showing that everyone's trying to be sympathetic or whatever, and Tony is just playing this part, which is very understandable because he killed Christopher and he can't tell anyone about it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's also very similar to when Tony's mother died, because he also had to he felt bad that he couldn't say that he didn't feel that sad about it.
Yeah.
He had to go through play the role, and yeah, here he is again playing the role, and they have to talk about like the baby seats, and not to jump around, but I love when he's telling the director at the funeral about the baby seat was crushed, and the guy's just like, yeah, okay, that's right.
Yeah, he'll tell anyone who will listen about that baby seat. But yeah, here he talks about how he didn't have his seatbelt on or whatever.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. And that they're going to do a blood test to see if he was on the drugs and all. And I mean, Tony says, like, when Silvio implies maybe he was on the drugs, he's like, I would have been furious. I would have fucking strangled him myself. The interesting thing is, Tony could literally tell his guys, like, yeah, he was high. I killed him. And the only thing there is, it's literally just so people don't have things to rat him out about, because I don't think any of them, like, yeah, they might be a little bit upset, but, like, it wouldn't really matter that much to them. But it's just... It's kind of weird that he's committed a murder, and it's only on a technicality that he's not telling Sil. Like,
yeah, I think you're right, because I think with the rationale they would somewhat understand, because it's like, yeah, Christopher put the boss of the family in danger type deal. But I still think there also is an element where even if everyone agreed upon that, there would be this lingering feeling of like
family.
Yeah, or just like, well, would Tony kill me for something? Like,
yeah,
I mean, because similar to Ralph, although Ralphie had less of an excuse, but it just, I don't know. I guess I think there's still that. It wouldn't be an immediate thing, but maybe it'd be this weird festering thing that would happen. But that's just all my hearsay, anyways.
No, that's a good point. I think you're right, because everyone rightly thinks that Tony is a bit bananas and might kill them at any time. So no need to add fuel to that flame. Anyway, Tony makes his way downstairs, and guess who's there? Carlo's there. Gets help from Meadow there. And Paulie, I just love seeing Paulie feel like at least a little bit guilty. Like, maybe I didn't do right by him. It's like, these two, they've had some times, haven't they, Jim?
Yeah, and I love that Christopher gets like one more fuck you to Paulie, even in post-mortem. I just wanted to call out that they also have the classic, like, someone in the family died spread. Like, they always have like a caterer on hand. You know, it's like, someone died. We're all at the Soprano house. I assume maybe Artie Bucco or someone sent over, some nice catering platters of sandwiches. But yeah, it is nice seeing Paulie like show a little bit of, at least here, a little bit of affection and emotion for Christopher after all the trials and tribulations that they've had together.
Oh, you mean the final fuck you would be that Paulie's mother sort of dies and no one cares?
Yeah, and that everyone's at the Moltisanti funeral and not. It's like this last little piece of their rivalry is still going on, even when Christopher has passed on.
Yeah, he got the last word for sure. But yeah, his wife's parents, the dad's who we just got to know last episode, I think, is not too impressed. Because, he left his daughter widow, and, he was on the drugs, and it all comes out. And, we find out then about Nucci Gualtieri as well.
Yes, yeah, so we could put old Nucci up on the board as well. Let me get my counter up. Giving us lucky number 76, Nucci Gualtieri. And I mean, I guess we'd already seen hints of that. They'd kind of mended their relationship. I remember when Paulie went to visit her, and he sat silent with her while she was watching TV. I don't think she was watching Gilmore Girls at that time, but She was a known avid viewer. But yeah, and as we mentioned, I like how it plays out where, Paulie's being very Paulie in the moment where he's concerned about the amount of people that showed up at the wake. But in this time at the in-laws, we see Christopher's mother, and Tony can't stand that she's putting it on as far as her emotion, even though it is her son that died.
Yeah.
But they've mentioned how she's like an alcoholic and she's dealt with her own things. So what she's trying to drink, and just putting on a show. And then, as we mentioned, they get the news about Paulie's aunt / mother, and then we have Tony's fake out Melfi scene.
Yes, and this one, it's quite long. Like, it goes into a lot of stuff in a way, or the whole, what Tony's feeling about it in the way that a therapy scene usually would. But then, like you said, there's the fake out, which usually, when most shows do this sort of thing, it's not usually something that feels completely justified. It's just a way to keep things a bit interesting. And here I feel that it is justified because it totally expresses Tony's desire to fully deal with this and talk about it in a way that he absolutely can't. Because he says, I've murdered friends before, I've murdered relatives and everything. And he there is a limit, even with Melfi, with what he can go into, obviously. So, yeah, a good fake out because it kind of propels him to, fuck off out of there because he can't deal with it. And we get the later scene, which is basically the same, but a bit softer because he's, his censored version of that scene later. But he obviously has a deep desire to try to deal with these emotions, and he doesn't really have a chance to. So that's why he goes and does peyote in the desert.
Yeah, and I think having the later scene justifies it a little bit more as well, because it kind of gets into what Tony regularly does when he's with Melfi. Because I've kind of talked about that a lot, because sometimes we'll drop in and they're already like in reaction mode to, say, like Tony B's death or something like that. And obviously he's not saying he killed Tony B or other situations where he's cheating on Carm and stuff, but I always kind of tried to speculate, like, well, what does he actually say in some of these situations? How does he cover some of these stories? And yeah, I like it doesn't feel like a dream, obviously, at first, until he's saying murdered, and then you get a hint of a moment of like, did he slip? Is this a thing? And then they kind of have the dream out, but I think it works. It's a payoff.
I think so too.
And then he wakes up, asks Carm if he's talking in his sleep. Then we have classic Tony in his robe, finds a cleaver mug, tosses it out in the woods. I don't know why he couldn't just put it in the trash. I mean,
the trash would actually have gotten rid of it quicker, but it's just going to be out there in the woods festering. But that's fine, Tony. He wanted to get rid of Cleaver stuff even before all this, so I guess, the Cleaver thing also is, remember how Christopher got JT to go and pretend like, I was the one who had the idea about this and that, so that it wouldn't seem like Christopher had these fantasies about murdering Tony. Like, that's definitely something that played into it as well, along with him being on drugs. And again, I don't want to justify it too much, but Christopher has been on drugs and come in with a gun to kill Tony before. So, it's a slippery slope.
Although Tony was going to fuck his fiance. Oh,
absolutely. Absolutely.
Except the car accident in that case helped him.
Yeah, I mean, Tony. So it's the morning there. I think he asks Carmel to make some coffee. And is this when they start talking about, Tony starts talking about the car seat and everything, because he's relieved and he's projecting that onto her, right? And talks about, like, when I called you, I picked up on maybe a little bit of relief. And maybe he's right to a degree, because she reacts like, no, of course not. But also then, like, maybe I was relieved it wasn't you. So what do you feel is going on here? Tony ruins it all anyway by bringing up the child seat and all of that. So,
I mean, kind of like you said, going back to the dream, he wants to kind of tell someone, or he wants someone else to also be kind of glad that Chris is dead.
Yeah.
So they can kind of share that moment. I mean, it's very similar to Chris in a way, how Chris just wanted to tell someone about Adriana and how he felt about that. A little bit before that, Carmela's going over how she feels bad that she thought that Chris had something to do with Adriana's death. And it's kind of that classic fashion, how when someone dies,
Yeah.
I mean, in a lot of cases, rightfully so, you do want to let little things go where it's like, oh my God, like maybe we didn't always see things on the same page, but I never would wish them to die or something like that. But then also sometimes people do heinous shit, and then when they die, it's like they have to be an angel, much like Livia talking about her Johnny boy was a saint.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she's kind of talking about that. Why are we so quick to blame? She says, and then Tony gets into his. I thought I picked up a twinge of relief because he's just so desperate for someone else to kind of share his moment with him.
Yes, and so he brings up the baby seat, doesn't get the reaction he wants. So then he's talking about it with Melfi in the real therapy scene about how he was high as a kite and. The baby seat, and we get the clip from the beginning as well when he I think gets slight gets it partially off his chest, talks about how it might be for the best in his kind of business, and that the main thing being, what's the main thing he talks about?
Well, he gets into he does talk about he talks about how he has to play the part, like he has to play the part, but then that makes him annoyed at those people because it makes him feel like a hypocrite. Yeah. And then he's pissed at them because it's like, well, clearly they must be hypocrites too, or something like that, Yeah. But I do want to point out, it's so genius and it's so effortlessly funny when he says, "I was prostate with grief." Like the way they drop that in for, like, you don't need to have that joke in there. Yeah. But I just love that. So Sopranos that they would in this moment where he's kind of like spilling his guts about not spilling his guts to the extent he can, talking to Melfi, and it's kind of a serious scene trying to get into his mind state and comparing it to his dream. But like Tony once again fucking up a word, and it's kind of so quick, but I had to make a note about it because it's like, to me, it's such a hilarious, effortlessly done moment, and they don't dwell on it or point it out at all. But he also talks about, that Chris was basically like, he talks about Adriana to an extent because he talks about a huge problem of his own making that I handled it.
And it feels like he's so close, like he's saying it without saying it, basically. Yes. So I guess that's what he does most of the time in there.
And then he even brings up Tony B getting shot in the face. And it's like, he is getting, it feels like it's way more dangerously close to details. I guess, similar to what Chris was doing last episode with JT, or even he was in group therapy with that one guy. It's like these guys just need to talk to someone about this and they can't. Yeah.
What is the word he's going for when he says prostrate with grief? What is it?
I had to look at it, because I'm not familiar with the phrase either, but it's prostrate with grief is what you're supposed to say, but he says prostate with grief, which is, prostate, yes. Like,
yep. Well, prostrate, so prostate, okay. One of them is also the one when you're like worshiping someone, right? And you're like on the floor, is that the word? I think
yeah, that's one of them.
But hey, I'm Swedish, what do I know? Hey, let's move on. Juliana's at the funeral, that's interesting and sad. And Carmilla just somehow, like, her spider senses are tingling, and like, Tony definitely slept with this woman, and for once she's not right.
And it's such a, like, her delivery of the, like, oh, beautiful woman or whatever.
Yes.
It's so perfect. And it is a nice, it is an interesting moment the way she's at the funeral. And they did have a connection. We haven't seen her in a long time, but and just the way, like, I love that, because when you see her, like, even if she wasn't on the show before, it's classic Tony's type. Yes. And Carmela picks up on it immediately. So it's great.
Even though it would make more sense to think that Christopher was the one getting with her, given the situation, which was also accurate. But there's such a type that when Tony later goes to Vegas and sleeps with this ex, I guess, or whatever, of Christopher's, I had to check, like, has this character been in the show before? I am not sure,
For sure. And then they have they call out 3 to 5, 7 to 9.
Yes,
which
remind me now. So that, like, because this is an inside joke, kind of, because she is at all the funerals, and it was only like, was this something that became a thing because fans noticed it, or did they make it intentionally a thing without any sort of input on using the same background people, or what do you think?
I think it might have been a little of both. I think even at the time, because obviously, like, Reddit and internet discussions are way more like active now. But I mean, I guess it wasn't that long ago. People were still on message boards discussing the Sopranos and stuff like that. So I think people did notice, although I think she was also even credited as like, I think they call it 3 to 5, 7 to 9 in this one, but she was like 2 to 6, whatever, something or other in the previous one. So they did kind of have an inside gag, and then people picked up on it. So I think that's maybe why they call it out a little bit here towards the end.
What do the numbers mean again?
It's like the usual times that they have a viewing of Awake.
Okay.
Like
right.
they usually, they'll have like an early evening 3 to 5, and then they'll have a 7 to 9 like later.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Well,
yeah.
even if it's not like even if you don't know of it or haven't noticed it and haven't been on the internet and listened to the podcast, it's still hilarious the way it's played out here, where it's mentioned, and then when Polly's complaining about no one coming, she walks into that wake as well. Like, it's funny enough just internally within that without having any of the other knowledge. It's it's such a great shot because she just walks in between them. It's not emphasized or anything, but it's been pointed out earlier, so I just love that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, in this, you don't really need to drop in little things of humor like that in kind of like a, fairly heavy episode. We're coming up towards the end, but they don't. Yeah, they call it out a little bit, and then they just like let it play. It's pretty great.
Yep.
And then Kelly comes in, and they mention like Jackie Kennedy. She's got the big sunglasses, and she's getting all emotional, and Tony's noticing it.
So was this part of why you were like, he wants to fuck the widow, or is he just annoyed at this point?
I think it's just like every time she's around, he's like looking at her. I don't know. I don't know if it's just something I picked up on, but it just seems like, or it's just something in my own head. But I feel like he's always just kind of staring at her, and
you're right.
I don't know. I don't know if he's thinking about like, I should have fucked Adriana when I had the chance. Now there's this lady.
Yeah. I think it's definitely later, obviously, when she's breastfeeding. That's definitely part of it, because immediately after that he flies off. But this could also be part of it. I originally just saw it as him, again, being surrounded by grieving people and like being like not having the emotion to be able to connect with that and actually give them anything in return. He's just annoyed at them, and annoyed at them because he can't, because he's the hypocrite and all of that. So I just saw it as that. And you're right. He tells the director about the limb going through the baby seat.
Because I didn't know who that guy was at first. Like, it took me a second. I was like, oh, it's the Cleaver director.
Yeah.
That he's sitting next to him at the funeral. Well, but yeah, going back to, because when he's staring at her, at least I didn't get the same impression that he was annoyed like when he looked at Chris's mother. And then usually in a TV show or with this type of character moment, you would get that maybe he felt bad that he caused, a baby to grow up without a dad, or a wife to be a widow. But again, I mean, I guess he does immediately go to the baby seat. So in his mind, he saved that baby from certain death. And maybe he's just thinking like, I could be the father to that child, and I could marry her. We could live in this nice house.
Yeah, maybe. So yeah, we move over to Polly's wake.
Real quick, we kind of jumped over it. AJ, there's a quick scene just shows that he's closer with those dudes now, and they're even like, they even kind of have an understanding of his headspace in a weird way, because they do say like, hey, don't like let this get to you, or something like that. They have a line, and they're all hugging, group hug. It's like, fast friends.
Yeah. That is kind of nice. And I couldn't, first I was like, these are the dudes from the other episode, right? Because I was like, are these childhood friends? What's going on? But we haven't seen much of AJ's social life. It is the dudes he went to the strip club with, I guess. It's good that he has someone around. Because that we do move on to AJ in therapy after that, right? I think that, I mean, we go to Polly being all upset, but there's not much there except Polly being really annoyed. And then we get to see AJ in therapy. and it seems to be working. The meds are doing their thing.
Yeah, AJ's in therapy. He seems better, but he is. They mentioned how he's sitting in some college classes and stuff like that. But that's why he's hearing about Israel and Palestine, how dicked up over there it is.
Yeah, I mean, hey, the more things change, am I right?
Yeah, exactly. It's relevant even to this day, huh?
Yeah.
And
then they have a fun moment where they ridicule the guy whose toes they acided off. So that's fun.
yeah, they're like, oh, well, because he's out sitting on a stoop, like talking to a girl. They're comparing like antidepressants.
Yeah.
And then she's like, oh, I've heard that guy got his toes amputated, and they had like cracking up because they have this inside joke that they poured acid on his feet.
Hilarious.
Yeah, great. Just stuff, when you have really good friends, you just have inside jokes and you get to smile and like have a knowing glance. Other people don't know this secret.
Yep. And so we have the scene we already mentioned with Tony where again he just is upstairs and we get this bird's eye view of people downstairs, the widow and Christopher's mother and someone else, and there's breastfeeding, and then he goes to Vegas.
Yeah.
But I have to say, Jim, like, really jealous. Like, your hometown has gotten a lot more play. There was that one scene where they talked about St. Stephen's Green in Dublin. That was seasons and seasons ago. Why didn't they do more there? There's an Irish mafia. Like, there could have been stuff, but no, it's all Vegas, huh? I'm jealous.
Yeah, there could have been a nice Irish connection, but nope. Yeah, he rings up Vegas. They're like, "Oh, we'll send a plane for you. You bring in the boys." He's like, "Nah, just me." And yeah, it's such a Sopranos thing. I mean, I know we already mentioned it at the beginning of this episode, but yeah, to just kill Chris off within the first like 10 minutes, and then by like 33 minutes in, now Tony's dealt with all this. He can't deal with all these people and their emotion, and he's just on a plane to Vegas now.
Yes, and it's such an empty plane. He's there in his fancy suit, like looking out at the whole of the U.S. passing underneath him, and he looks really contented. He's like, "Oh yeah, I'm on my own now, and I'm okay." Really reminds me of these. This time he had to like go into hiding and go to a hotel room, the one with the dream sequence, and he's just kind of hanging out on his own a lot because that's what he's doing here at first. Just kind of chilling, just kind of getting driven here and there, just playing some roulettes on his own, like just getting dinner on his own. It's just all these scenes in sequence of him just hanging out by himself.
And he's still losing. At least when we cut in on him playing roulette.
Yes, but he doesn't seem to care, which is the difference, I think. Even like the thrill in a way of potentially winning or losing doesn't matter in this moment. The loss is just like, well, all right. Instead of like going, yeah, I'll bet it all, he's just like, whatever. I'll just walk off and have some more dinner by myself.
And then we have a quick shot of AJ in class, and he's learning. Like he's making a face like he's taking it all in. So that's going on. Tony. Then we got back. Tony's sitting by the pool. I think he's at Caesar's Palace here. And then we're back at AJ in class. Yeah, he's still taking it all in. He's still going in. And then I like they just drop you in to Tony. Then shows up at this like condo or whatever. And there's this chick, and like you said, like even knowing this, I had a second guess of like, wait a minute. So do we know who this person is? Yeah. And like, no, we don't. And even then, they don't really fully explain it. Like, is Chris putting this girl up, or is it just some girl on the side? Is it his like guma? Like, I don't know the intricacies of this relationship here, but I mean,
I thought it was. I guess it doesn't really matter. I thought it was at first like a high class escort situation,
yeah, that's got to be it, right?
Yeah, and that Tony's literally there for like that. It's understood that that's why he's there. But then the more it goes on, I'm like, I don't know. I guess I don't. Never been with a high class escort myself, so it's hard to say what it's actually like.
Yeah, because I think that makes more sense because I wasn't sure. I know sometimes they'll have a guma and they'll put him up in a place, and I didn't know if he was there to give her the news that like the gravy train's done, you got to pay your own rent. But I guess they mentioned that she's a stripper or something, putting herself through school, so maybe she's not too hard up for money. Either way. It is, like you said, Tony slipping into Chris mode
Is this what apartments look like in Vegas, Jim? It looks pretty nice.
I mean, actually, you know what? Yeah, it kind of is. I mean, most people, it's the way the cost of living here is. You can usually rent a house, but yeah, it's pretty much what the condos look like too.
Nice. Yeah, I guess that's the thing. Would you have space to build? Which again, not a thing in Dublin. We don't have any of that. So rent is ridiculous and tiny. And I guess it's a better choice for Tony to go to Vegas. I'll concede.
And they kind of leave it like he just gives her the news, and then he leaves. He gets a call. He's back at his hotel or whatever. He gets a call from back home. They're dealing with where to dump the asbestos because it's building up. We got to get rid of this asbestos. And Tony's still holding a hard line with Phil against Christopher's good advice, I would say.
Yeah.
Then in the middle of that, we have a hate crime that happens.
Yeah, real quick. We just got to fit that in. These cool dudes helping AJ through this emotionally rough time, and having a great time, melting people's feet off and such. Quick hate crime real quick, and we're going to beat you up and toss you around and break your bike. And hate crime you as well.
And, so why does this, is it just the fact that it's a hate crime that this hits AJ more than, say, cutting someone's toes off? I guess there's more reasoning behind, well, not necessarily cutting someone's toes off, but burning their toes off. I guess there's more reasoning behind that because that person was a gambler and there was at least a transaction money that was owed. But in this situation, it technically was just an innocent guy trying to do work, trying to get to class and do a job or whatever. And they beat him up. They throw his car in the road. It gets run over by a truck in comic timing fashion.
Yes. I don't know. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
Or is it just AJ's just been a ticking time bomb and it just he was going to have a come down sooner or later?
Yeah, it could be partially, he was really excited to go to the Latinx parade or whatever, and this is obviously different, but it's still oppression, and now he's, I don't know, is he white power now? I don't think he wants to be, but then it could also be just partially it was exciting in the moment, the violence stuff with the acid. But that's all sinking in now, maybe, and this could be an emotional hangover of oh shit, we really did that thing, and now we're doing a thing that's totally unjustified, unlike that. And these are the type of people I hang out with, and we can't I think he is in therapy again, right? Yeah,
it does pop up in therapy, to follow his storyline. He does pop up in therapy again, and they do it is kind of a silly joke where he says, why can't we all just get along? He does the Rodney King line in the moment where they're talking about the hate crime, but he's depressed again is kind of the main thing. I guess the violence isn't always giving him that adrenaline rush that he needs.
Yeah, and I think if he even I guess the medication, and combination of everything meant he had an upswing, and that's going to be followed by a downswing, and then just this random act of violence could be enough to sort of trigger that or coincide with that to make that be the focus of what's going on in his brain, his small brain. Yeah,
and in the middle of that, Tony does have sex with Chris's girl, and then they smoke a little weed. And Tony is such a lightweight because I think he even has wow, this is some crazy stuff or whatever. And they 2 puffs off of a joint. She does bring up Chris, and he, of course, he's why would you bring Chris up? They're having pillow talk. And then the peyote comes up. You remind me of him, I think she says, or something about you were friends. And then the most important thing is that they talk about the peyote.
Yeah, I mean, he's really upset that she's going to bring up Chris, even though he went to her, he went to get away from everyone grieving, and then he's I think I'll find someone who's grieving real quick so that I can have sex with them and become Christopher real quick. And even when she says, he says, oh, what, so I fuck like him or whatever? It's such a weird line. But I don't know, he's still annoyed by it, and, this I don't know if he calls it dope or whatever he calls it, but he's really enjoying that and thinks maybe try some harder stuff. He always talked about peyote, and this is what I mean when he's like he never got to release the responsibilities like Chris did, so he's like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna be Chris for a bit. Like that's I guess his way of coping, which is a very weird way, but you know, whatever works when you're a murderer.
Yeah, yeah. And then we have we have a scene with Phil. And doesn't Phil kind of doesn't he make like a comment about Chris somewhat, where he's like, oh yeah, when it takes long to grieve or something? Or am I jumping around? I forget if that's in this one or not.
I'm not sure. I don't think that's here.
Okay. Anyways, they're talking about the asbestos. They're still trying to figure out if they can make a deal here, and then they're not gonna. He hangs up on him. AJ's back in therapy. He's depressed again. Why can't we all just get along? And
That's right.
then Tony's eating peyote with Chris's girl.
Yeah, and great cut to him just throwing up. And I was like, oh no, it's going to go bad. But then I guess it goes good. I don't know about drugs. I don't understand them, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that when you take shrooms, sometimes you get sick and throw up. Although, I mean, that I've taken shrooms before. Don't narc me out, guys. We've taken an oath, no rats. I've never gotten sick before, but maybe I've never tried to take a ton to like have an insane trip.
I assumed that if he threw it up, he wouldn't be affected by it, but it clearly shows us looking up at the lamp, he's like amazed by it, so it clearly worked, did the trick.
Yeah, because I've never taken peyote, but I think with some hallucinogens, you're supposed to get sick first, and I don't know, it somehow like makes it kick in. But yeah, then we get into like we see they're walking around the casino. I guess it would be a great place to walk around fucked up because you have all this gaudy, fucking insane bullshit, lights, statues. We do see a devil on a slot machine. They do call back a little bit to, or at least like people call back to when Carlo was talking about that Twilight Zone episode that Tony said maybe he should go suck cock instead. The episode he was referring to was about a man who could win at every gamble. Like, he was gambling, he would win every time, and he'd fuck every woman that he wanted, and he thought he was in heaven. But it being the Twilight Zone, he was in hell. Right. And I think there is some some similarities here, because Tony does start winning, and he falls over like laughing in the casino. I feel like you get like arrested for doing shit like this if it really happened.
Yeah. Well, it's what were they talking about when Carlo originally brought that up as a reference? Was it just that Tony was losing a bunch of shit and Carlo was bringing up some nonsense, right? Like that was...
Yeah, kind of, because it was in the when they were talking about Hesh, like him owing money to Hesh and stuff like that, and him losing. So yeah, he was getting into that a little bit.
It feels like it's there to prime us up for this because it is a very appropriate parallel for what's happening here. And you know, I think he does like 3 gambles or whatever, and he wins every time. And you totally expect him to lose but not care again, but he just keeps winning and like gives the dealer some money, and like they're just super high, and he falls over and all of this. He also says like he's dead or whatever as he's sort of realizing that he's winning. Yes. What do you think that's about?
Because they asked David Chase about like because tying it in a little bit, not to jump too ahead, but when he starts yelling, "I get it" at the end, and yeah. I mean, I don't buy Chase's answer, and I think it's very David Chase. Obviously, he doesn't want to give an answer to what's happening there, but he's like, you know, Chris was a liability, and it's great that he's dead. That's why he's winning now. And I'm just like, I don't know about that, David Chase. But I guess as that as an answer is maybe what Tony's mind is that like it is this weird, even though he was still losing beforehand. But maybe in his mindset, it is this weird, like, I did the right thing. This is kind of my reward. I get to be high and win. And I got this beautiful girl with me. And it's all because Chris is dead. It's all because of this thing that I should feel bad about that I did. But it's actually a great thing that I did.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure. Because later, obviously, if you jump ahead, he sees the flashing light and yells,
Yeah.
"I get it!" And that is a very clear reference back to when he was in the coma and saw the
For
flashing
sure.
lights. But were there two flashing lights? Was one hell and one heaven? Or it's a bit blurry at this point.
There was a wildfire to like the
Mm,
west or whatever, and then to the other side there was a beacon.
yeah.
But I feel like, I mean, clearly, I think there is something to be said for that Twilight Zone where that character thinks he's in heaven, but he's
Yeah.
not. I mean, especially like because he's in the desert now. Like by this time, when he sees the Flash, he's in the desert, and it is kind of like sunrise or whatever. So it's like red and barren. And maybe Tony does think he's in heaven, but I think he's already sealed his fate, where that's not a thing anymore. Going back to, I think you might have brought it up, like he was in that hotel room having the dreams, and that was very much like he went in the bathroom and it was red and hell-like, and then he went out on the deck and it was bright utopia.
Yeah.
I don't think he's in the middle anymore. I mean, not to say that he ever was, because I mean, the show's been about how he's a terrible person. But I think it's like he's too far gone at this point.
Yes, and speaking of things being too far gone, there's a scene in between that we jump over
Yes.
where the asbestos is dumped, and like it's so on the nose, and I might be annoyed at someone else for pointing this out, but like there are ducks there. You can hear ducks.
Yes, totally.
With that in mind, I think the cawing crow is also intentional because they do both of them in the same episode. It just makes sense to me, and it's just great that they're dumping all this asbestos and all the ducks are gonna die, and it's just, I don't know. It's such a great long metaphor to get back to, just like Tony has sealed his own fate, the family or what have you, or what call it. It is so like, it's so fucked at this point. Especially if we include Christopher as part of the family, which he was, then yeah, I mean, he was afraid of all of his family going away and all the good times ending. And now on the surface, he's having good times, like you said. But the flashing lights and the ducks, I'd say they're far out of reach at this point.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And even if like you don't even go into the heaven and hell like metaphors, at the very least that flashing light was death. I mean, obviously, like, and because he was close to death, and then he was going to go into the
party or whatever.
But he didn't want to.
Yeah.
But now it's almost like, I don't know, I guess he's kind of more open to it, if you will.
Yeah, so that does tie up this episode. I have to emphasize again that as I've watched this whole show, there's been an uncertainty of like, I've totally thought that at some point Christopher might kill Tony, This is something, this is the space of storytelling that you live in. This is the Schrodinger's cat of like what could potentially happen, that I actually think like, oh, it could go that way. And now I can never watch The Sopranos again, not knowing this piece of information. Really glad no one spoiled it. Thanks for not tweeting at us, at Shows What You Know. That's you, the letter U on Twitter. And thank you for not sending spoilers to showswhatyouknow@gmail.com, where you can get in touch with your thoughts. I'd be really interested in what people think about Chris's death and everything in connection with it. Of course, we're coming up on the very end of the show, so perhaps, Mark, if you send us an email, mark in the subject line what episode you're discussing, just to make sure we're on the same page. And once again, that's showswhatyouknowshow@gmail.com.
Yeah, no, I do think it's because even not by like malicious intent, like it would have made complete sense if you accidentally stumbled over something like that. Because I think even like Big Pussy, did you know about any of that stuff? Like even going back earlier?
No,
I think that's great, because some of that stuff just became like, because like
kind of,
yeah, memes. Or I mean, if you look at something more recent like Game of Thrones, where obviously there's more internet fever around stuff like that, but things just become headlines or in passing, and it's just assumed like, well, this is an old show, so we could clearly talk about this.
Yeah.
So I think that's not to pat our show on the back, but I think that's a great angle we have, that you're going on this journey for the first time and picking up a lot of these things, like you said, without that knowledge. Because I'm going to have to go back, because I think it was in maybe when we talked about the season 1 finale, you know, some of your like, I think this is what might happen, and I think we might go here. I think we've had some good ones with that. I like to see how those played out. But yeah, no, that's great.
I would love that as well. And I think I mentioned maybe last week that I am looking forward to rewatching The Sopranos with this knowledge and just seeing, you know, how my opinion has changed. And I don't know if the proper etiquette is for me to find someone else who hasn't seen The Sopranos, and then we go through this process, and then that person finds someone else who hasn't seen The Sopranos, and this is just how we slowly spread The Sopranos in today's day and age, where everyone's all about their Witchers and whatnots. Now, if you're into your Witchers and whatnots, why not go to Shows What You Know show? Oh shit, I fucked it up. Just showswhatyouknow.com. It's showswhatyouknow.com for all of our other coverage, and we will continue making podcasts. We were making podcasts long before Cut to Black, and we'll continue doing so about various television shows. Anything you want to recommend us to take a look at, please feel free to email us to the email I mentioned before. Once again, that's showswhatyouKnowShow@gmail.com.
Absolutely. So all great information, great episode of television. Alan Taylor, I believe, did win a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Directing for a Drama Series.
As he should.
Yep. So with all that being said, there's just one last thing to cover here.
What's that, Jim?
Cut to black. Jesus. And we're out.